Hello everyone, this is Remlays from 40k Theories, and welcome to this new episode of 40k Lore for Newcomers. For this episode, we will be taking a brief look at the Necrons. As always, this is a brief overview and certain events and such will have in-depth videos dedicated to them within the future. So without further ado, let's begin.
Our people are awakening, and soon all of the galaxy shall be ours once more.
The Necrons are an ancient race of robotic constructs, with an appearance that is reminiscent of mechanical skeletons, constructed from tough and resilient living metal known as necrodermis. They are the oldest race within the entire galaxy, even older than the ancient Eldari, and have existed long before the evolution of humanity. They once ruled a large portion of the galaxy and waged war with many other races, before entering a long period of stasis to escape from the retribution of their enemies. They have remained dormant for millions of years within the depths of their immense tomb complexes, and now they have begun to awaken, with more and more worlds every day being revealed as ancient Necron tomb worlds. Some claim that the Necrons rise to annihilate all life within the galaxy, while others say they seek to rebuild their ancient empire. Whatever the reason for their awakening, they are undoubtedly one of the most dangerous and terrifying threats within the galaxy.
The secrets of the universe are within my grasp. You cannot stop me now.
Over 60 million years ago, long before the evolution of humanity, and long before they became the Necrons, the ancient race known as the Necrontyr evolved upon a world that was bombarded by the immense amount of radiation emitted from their system's native star. While they were still flesh and blood, the Necrontyr were a short-lived species who sought immortality in any way, shape or form possible, be it through the act of having grand tombs constructed for them as vast memorials, or by committing great acts that would be remembered throughout the ages. Over the course of several millennia, the Necrontyr began to colonize the stars, creating a vast galactic empire, and would create many advanced technologies, including destabilization matrices that could shift items in and out of sync with real space, which is used for both offensive and defensive purposes. But the Necrontyr's most famous technological achievement was their development of necrodermis. Necrodermis is also known as living metal, and very much like organic tissue, it can heal any damage inflicted upon it. As such, the Necrontyr utilized this material in the creation of many pieces of technology, such as starships and even the future bodies of the Necrons themselves. This empire was split into several factions known as dynasties, each ruled over by an overlord known as a pharaoh. Each of these dynasties in turn owed their allegiance to the ruling council of the Necron Empire, known as the Triarch. The Triarch was comprised of 3 of the pharaohs from the separate Necron dynasties, and the most prominent amongst them would be gifted the title of the Silent King, who would become the de facto ruler of the Necrontyr. However, as their empire grew, the Necrontyr would be racked by a series of civil wars known as the First War of Secession. These wars fractured the fledgling Necrontyr empire, resulting in multiple independent realms who would fight each other as well as the ruling Triarch of the Necrontyr Empire. Despite these civil wars, the Necrontyr Empire would continue to expand, and would crush almost every other race they encountered underfoot until they came into contact with the enigmatic race known as the Old Ones. This encounter would lead to a great war known in historical records as the War in Heaven, and this series of events would lead towards the Necrontyr being transformed into the modern-day Necron race.
Death stands above me, whispering low, I know not what's in my ear. Of his strange language all I know, there is only pain and fear.
While the various dynasties of the Necrontyr Empire were embroiled in their internecine conflicts, the last of the Silent Kings, Sharek, sought to unify the various warring factions against a common enemy. In order to do this, the Necrontyr declared war against the Old Ones. In truth, the Necrontyr coveted the secret of biological immortality, which the Old Ones themselves had deliberately kept secret from them. Despite having the advantage of overwhelming numbers compared to that of the Old Ones inflicted devastating losses against the Necrontyr race, due to the fact that the Necrontyr was still fractured, each loyal to individual pharaons rather than the Empire as a whole. If the Old Ones were so inclined, they could have easily pushed the Necrontyr into extinction. Many of the dynasties would have sought peace between the two races, but the Triarch continued to push more and more of their forces into a conflict they had no hope of winning. This in turn led to the Second War of Succession, as many dynasties abandoned the war with the Old Ones and returned to their old civil wars, and the Triarch were upon the brink of losing total control. It seemed certain that the Necrontyr were doomed, until the godlike beings known as the Khitan made themselves known to the Necrontyr. How the Khitan made themselves known to the Necrontyr isn't entirely known, as there are multiple contradictory accounts in regards to their first contact. Some say that the Khitan were attracted to the Necrontyr by their hatred of the Old Ones. Others claim that the Khitan were energy beings who would be captured and turned into weapons of war by the Necrontyr. What is known, however, is that the Khitan were eventually gifted physical bodies constructed from necrodermis, and each Khitan in turn was gifted a form that was a representation of the gods that the Necrontyr worshipped in their infancy. One of the Khitan, known as the Deceiver, informed Sharek that their kind had warred with the Old Ones long ago, and offered the Silent King a deal. In return for the Necrontyr's aid in finally destroying the Old Ones, the Khitan would gift the Necrontyr with not only rule over the galaxy, but also the secret to immortality. Sharek agreed to the Deceiver's bargain. This would lead to the mass biotransference of the Necrontyr, where their organic forms would be purged and replaced with mechanical bodies forged from necrodermis. The Necrontyr were no more, and in their place were the Necrons. An unforeseen effect of the biotransference process is that the personalities of the newly formed Necrons were unable to be retained in the majority of bodies. Only the highest ranking members of Necron society, such as the Triarch and Pharaons, were able to retain the majority of their personality, while soldiers retained but a fragment, and civilians became little more than mindless drones. The process would also implant a loyalty program within the mind of the majority of Necrons, gifting the race loyalty to the Silent King at the cost of their free will. The Khitan feasted upon the essence of the Necrontyr during the biotransference process, and the Silent King would soon come to realize that his people had gained immortality and true unity, but at the cost of their very souls. Now equipped with their new and powerful forms, the Necrons and the Khitan launched a series of counter-offensives against the Old Ones, who were forced to create numerous other races to serve as soldiers in their war, including the Eldari and the Krork, the ancestors of modern-day orcs. This would, however, be in vain, as the Old Ones would eventually be wiped out, due to the combination of the Khitan and Necron assault with a series of warp-borne contagions, and the arrival of malevolent entities spawned from the warp, such as the Enslavers, proved to be the tipping point, pushing the Old Ones to extinction. It was then that the Silent King decided to avenge the horrors inflicted upon his people. After the Old Ones were destroyed, the Silent King led the Necrons into open revolt against the C'tan, who in their arrogance did not view their servants as a plausible threat. But their hubris cost him dearly, and the C'tan, while impossible to completely destroy, was shattered into myriad fragments, and each shard would be imprisoned within a tesseract labyrinth. The Silent King would not allow his people to be slaves to anyone ever again. While the old ones were destroyed, their creations lived on. The Silent King would order the Necrons to retreat to their tomb worlds, where they would enter a stasis known as the Great Sleep. The Necrons would simply bide their time, and wait for the Eldarian Krork to simply go extinct, and would slumber for millions of years. The Silent King then severed the command protocols that gave him control over the Necrons, leaving them free to follow their own paths when they finally awoke, and he would not be seen or heard from again until very recently with the coming of the Tyranids. While the Necrons slept deep within their tomb worlds, events transpired which meant that many of them would never again awaken. Some of these tomb worlds fell to the predations of treasure hunters, archaeologists in search of knowledge, or simply fell to the avenging blows of the Eldari. Others would fall inactive, as their systems would gradually fail, and others still would be lost forever, due to being destroyed by galactic events beyond anyone's control, such as their system's star going supernova. The majority of the tomb worlds, however, have begun their long awakening process. While the timing of these awakenings is considered to be erratic, the process to fully awaken the warriors within a tomb world is a long, time-consuming process. But now, the Necrons are slowly but surely growing in strength, and will soon seek to reclaim a galaxy that they believe is theirs by right.
Time is a weapon like any other. If nothing else, I can simply wait for my foes to rot.
While the tomb worlds are beginning to awaken, there is no overarching plan for the Necrons to follow once they return to the waking world. Some worlds have focused on reinforcing their defences, while others have begun to launch a series of campaigns to sow terror and commit genocide upon the various other races of the galaxy, and other tomb worlds still simply desire to retrieve any of their artifacts that was stolen from their empire by these upstart organic races. As befitting a race constructed from living metal, the Necrons are an extremely durable race with incredibly powerful weaponry at their disposal. The Necrons make heavy use of Gorse technology within their weaponry. These Gorse weapons will strip layer after layer from their target by breaking down the target to their component molecules. This allows even the most basic of Gorse weapons to flay the armour and flesh off of living targets, or even strip away the armour of super heavy tanks with relative ease. These Gorse weapons can range in size from the standard Gorse Flayer gun, which is wielded by basic Necron warriors, to the massive Gorse Exterminator, which can reduce entire buildings to little more than rubble. The Necrons themselves are notoriously difficult to destroy. This is not only due in part to their composition of living metal, which, as described earlier, can regenerate damage done to it, but this is more in part due to the fact when a Necron suffers catastrophic damage, their mind and bodies will be teleported to the nearest tomb complex. Within these tomb complexes, the damage to the Necron's body will either be repaired or a new body will be forged, and the Necron's mind will be downloaded into its new form. However, this comes at a price, as over time the neural engrams will begin to decay and degrade, and Necrons will eventually become little more than mindless automata. Necrons also lack the capability to utilize warp travel. Instead, the Necrons have developed other methods to travel the vast expanse of space. Necron spacecraft have specialized propulsion systems called inertialess drives, which allow them to travel at near light speed to cross the void of space. In addition to these, Necrons have been known to use special portals known as dolmen gates, which tap into the webway, although currently the amount of webway access granted by Dolmen Gates is extremely limited compared to the days of the War in Heaven. So that concludes this brief overview on the Necrons. As always, certain characters and entities, such as the various dynasties and the Khitan, will be given in-depth videos to each of them within the future. If you like this video, consider supporting us on Patreon for more content. To those who are new to 40k, we hope you learned something. So leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.